Jam is an inclusive fashion brand designed for people with disabilities in mind. Jam was created in 2019 by Emma and Molly, who are two occupational therapists working in the disability sector. Emma and Molly were inspired by their work with two young people, Jack and Maddie, hence the name Jam. So welcome, Molly and Emma, and over to you to let us and everyone know about what you guys at Jam do.
Thanks, Jack, for the introduction, and thank you to Ability Partners for having us today, where I'm really excited to speak to you all and to tell you a bit about Jam. So as Jack said, Jam is an inclusive clothing brand designed by myself, Emma, and Molly, my co-founder, and we're both currently working as occupational therapists in the disability sector. As Jack also said really well, is that Jam is an inclusive clothing brand designed with people with disability in mind. This means that all of our products have design features that enable a person with disability to get dressed a little bit more easily or wear our items more comfortably.
Sorry, so go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. So as you can see on the screen here, this is myself and Emma with Jack and Maddie, who, as Jack said, are the namesakes for Jam. So when we were studying to be occupational therapists, Emma and I worked as disability support workers and actually still continue to do so to this day. So when we would do disability support work, we would sort of do all sorts of different activities with Jack. So I worked with Jack, and one of our favourite activities was to go for a walk. But, you know, being in Melbourne, the weather can change obviously very quickly. We're from Melbourne, and we would need to put our jackets or jumpers on quite quickly. So I could easily put my jumper on, but with helping Jack, it was always quite a struggle. And I would end up either sort of putting his hoodie on backwards quickly with the hood hanging down the front, or needed to put a blanket over him. And Emma and I would always come back together at uni and say, you know, we can easily put our jackets and jumpers on, so why can't Jack and Maddie do the same?
Thank you. So whilst this is born from the needs of Jack and Maddie, as you would all be aware, 1 in 5 Australians experience disability, which means it is extremely diverse, with no two people having the same dressing needs. We utilise principles of universal design to create inclusive clothing products that meet a broad range of needs. This means they can be worn by a wider demographic of customers, but it also aligns really well with our ethics and how we view inclusion over segregation. So rather than creating products that can only be used by for people with disability, we create fashionable items that have features that include people with disability within the mainstream fashion industry.
So as Emma said, our designs consider all sorts of people with all sorts of different dressing needs. So we consider people with physical disability. So that does include people who use wheelchairs like Jack and Maddie. It also includes people with sort of fine motor difficulties or decreased fine motor skills, such as someone with arthritis. We consider people with intellectual disability who might have difficulty sort of matching up buttons or doing up the bit with the zip and sort of zipping their jumper up. We consider those with sensory differences, such as someone with autism who for their tags or seams can be very distressing. And we also those people with chronic pain or fatigue, whilst they may not have any sort of traditional dressing needs in terms of getting dressed over the day in the morning might mean that they then need to go to bed for 2 hours because their pain's flared up or their fatigue has set in. So it's sort of, yeah, looking at how we can address lots of those dressing needs by simple changes.
And so as you can see on the screen, we've got a few examples of our products here. So we've got our tops, which look like any other tops. However, they've got no tags, which none of our products do, and the flat seams to address the need Molly was just talking about. They're also made of bamboo, so super comfy. And they've got 10% elastane, which makes them really stretchy, which helps with people with reduced mobility or that need to stretch the top over rigid limbs or anything like that without losing shape or tearing. Then we've got our linen shirts in the corner, which again, look like any other linen shirt, but instead of buttons, we have magnets. So as Molly mentioned, for people that have fine motor difficulties, this is great, but also for people with intellectual disability who might find difficulty with aligning buttons, or again, as Molly said, for people with chronic pain or fatigue, it just saves them a bit of time with dressing each day. And then the final product on this page is our original product, our jacket that we created inspired by the story Molly told at the start with Jack. And this, as you can see in the photo, fully zips open on both sides and goes on like a poncho while seated in the wheelchair.
So a couple more of our products here. So our two sets of pants. So we've got our high-waisted pants on the left and our chino pants on the right. They both allow for side access, so that the chino pants zip at the side and the high-waisted pants have functional buttons that open up, and that allows for people who have assistance getting dressed, allows easier access to things like continence aids or getting dressed lying down. We have, for those who don't need that though, we've got elastic waists on both of our sets of pants with pull tabs. So someone who is getting dressed by themselves can just pull those pants up easily and put them on, but they look like any other pants. We've got soft and stretchy fabric on both of them, and they both have a drop crotch. So that not only allows for sort of discretion of continence aids because there's a little bit more room, but that allows it to be pulled up a bit higher for those in the seated position. And the last product we have there is our tote bag. So we've got our tote bag comes in 3 different color options, and they have 2 shorter straps. As you can see, they're connected to the back of Jason's wheelchair. So they connect to wheelchair handles or pram handles, and the press studs allow them to be connected no matter sort of what the wheelchair handles or pram handle looks like. And then they've also got 1 long single strap, which we can't see now because it's tucked in, but that allows for it to be worn as a crossbody bag or on the on your shoulder as well.
So because all of our products make the act of dressing easier, they're actually considered low-cost assistive technology, so can be purchased through people's NDIS plans. We are not currently registered NDIS providers, so if a participant is self-managed or plan managed, they're able to purchase our products directly from our website, either by purchasing and reimbursing from their plan, or requesting an invoice, which we're happy to send out invoices, and then either the plan manager or the individual who self-manages can pay the invoice directly from their plan. Even though it is considered low-cost assistive technology and can be purchased through consumables in the core budget, it actually doesn't require a report or, a full assistive technology application. However, a lot of people, a lot of plan managers like to have just a bit of a backup. And so it's really common to ask the participants' occupational therapist just to provide a really simple 1-page supporting letter to have on file to show that our products are able to assist that participant with dressing each day, especially because our design features can be so subtle sometimes that it just helps to have an occupational therapist explain the reasoning behind why it is considered low-cost assistive tech.
So thank you for having us today. We've really enjoyed presenting to you. We want to offer everyone here today a bit of a discount. So we're offering 10% off our store with the discount code Ability Partners in all lowercase. And that's 10% off store wide.
We really hope that the take-home message from today was that lots of people can benefit from adaptive clothing. It's not simply just created for people that use wheelchairs. Molly and I, still working as occupational therapists, love to have chats with anyone in this sector, love to connect with people, anyone that has questions. So please feel free to reach out through the socials on this page, and we always love to have a chat and answer some questions. So thank you.
Thanks, Molly and Emma. I appreciate your letting us know about those products. It's really cool, and can see a lot of people in the chat. Really impressed. It's funny, such simple ideas can make such a big difference, and stuff that's not seen, very subtly and look good while doing it as well. So thank you guys, and I know you guys need to shoot off, but thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
No worries
Thank
at
you.
all.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. And we'll also put information in follow-up emails to everyone who's attended today if you want to know more about Jam the Label. So on to our next speakers. So if you follow us, Ability Partners, on social media, and you should, by the way, you may have seen us sharing about EDNA. So EDNA is the latest in kind of neurorehabilitation assistive technology, and is a therapy process that aids recovery from brain or neural injury. So our speakers today from EDNA team are Professor Jonathan Duckworth. So Jonathan's a pioneering new media artist and designer. He's collaborated extensively as an artist and designer, producing and directing a number of large-scale interactive media projects. His interests focus on the design, interaction, presence, and psychological effects of digital environments, having specialized in the development of interactive 3D graphics and applications over 10 years. And we also have Professor Peter Wilson, who over the last 26 years has developed and led programs of research on motor and cognitive development and motor rehabilitation, supported by several large ARC grants. This work has been recognized internationally as perhaps the first to investigate both typical and atypical motor development from a cognitive neuroscientific perspective. The basic science has been translated into important innovations in virtual rehabilitation for acquired brain injury. So Peter co-led an art science collab with Jonathan, which has designed, developed and validated the EDNA system. So welcome, Jonathan and Peter. We'll over to you. And again, any questions for the guys, just put in the chat and we'll circle back at the end of the session.
Great, thanks, thanks Jack for the introduction, and also thanks to the Ability Partners for the invitation to present today. So Peter and I, we've been developing EDNA since 2006, which was through sort of numerous research grants, including the Australian Research Council linkage scheme, and more recently, the Department of Industry and Innovation and Science through their Entrepreneurs program, which was to translate the research in EDNA to a commercially viable product. So we're delighted to introduce EDNA assistive technology today, and proud to be partnering with Ability Partners to make the technology available to their clients. So around acquired brain injury is common. Around 450,000 Australians suffer from acquired brain injury, which often leads to a sort of variety of impairment and long-term disability for patients and their families. And the causes of brain injury are quite varied. That can include accidents or trauma, stroke, brain infection, alcohol, or other sort of drug or diseases of the brain. And stroke is really the leading cause of long-term disability in most countries. Unfortunately, less than a third of brain injured patients receive sort of adequate inpatient and outpatient therapies, despite evidence that rehabilitation reduces disability post-injury. So yeah, over 50,000 Australians will suffer from stroke every year. It's the second most common cause of disability in Australia. And over 50% who survive a stroke require help with daily activities. So to address this need, we developed EDNA, which is Elements by Dynamic Neural Arts. And it's an upper limb rehabilitation system for individuals with an ABI, which combines a clinic or a tabletop EDNA system and a home-based tablet application. So it's an integrated rehab system that combines the digital table and tablet touchscreens using tangible handheld user interfaces and a suite of engaging and intuitive movement tasks, which combined with augmented feedback can enhance patients' motor and cognitive skills. So EDNA is cloud enabled. Therapists can customize prescriptions. They can be pushed to the patient's device, and the performance data is collected in the cloud. So some of the unique features of EDNA is that it was a science-led design and development, and it was born really from a sort of rehab science and user-centered design. It's an integrated platform, so it integrates both the clinic and the home. and it allows the cloud-based data system, which is enabled for the treating therapist. It's measurable, so adherence, performance, and recovery can be monitored over time. It's also important that the patients are motivated. The design is intuitive, it's engaging, and it's fun to use, and it enhances the patient's motivation and participation in their therapy. It's also flexible, so the task types and difficulty can be tailored to the individual needs of the patient. It's mobile, so it can facilitate hospital and in-home usage. And it's effective. It's the published data, which Peter will talk about in a little bit, and shows that sort of efficacy, superior efficacy to usual care. So I'm just going to show a short video on the EDNA device. So hopefully that plays back okay. Seems to be working. There we go. Brilliant, thanks. So EDNA is it's a 22-inch portable touchscreen that allows patients to continue therapy in the home following a cloud-based delivery of a tailored program. The software includes a range of engaging and intuitive game-like software tasks to enhance patients' motor functions and cognitive skills. The graspable interfaces assist the patients relearn object manipulation and placement skills, and they are, essential in daily action, like sort of lifting a cup or placing a food container. We've designed 4 simple graspable objects that offer the patient sort of varying perceptual motor cues for action. Our software can track the orientation and unique ID of the objects when they're placed on the display. And the applications consist of a series of goal-directed sort of game-like tasks of varying complexity, which are geared towards reaching, grasping, lifting, and moving a set of these objects on the display. There's a second mode of environments for composing sounds, drawing, and manipulating visual feedback that promotes creative activity to increase the level of patient engagement in their therapy. So we're tracking 3 aspects of arm movement. One is movement speed, accuracy of object placement, and movement efficiency. And these variables are recorded for later analysis and can be fed back to patients graphically to help them sort of visualize their performance and motivate continued progress to facilitate their learning. So from our website, therapists can log into their EDNA account. And here therapists can monitor the overall activity and task compliance on the EDNA system for all patients in the clinic. And the average time on task and session completion graphs are displayed at the top, and patients are listed below, showing on the most recently used EDNA. Therapists can add new patients, including details of their health condition and assessment on a classification scale. And in the prescription, therapists can choose the intensity of the activity for each patient. So task settings can be adjusted based on the patient's ability and their individual needs. And after setup, a user name and PIN will be generated for each patient used to access the EDNA device. And therapists can adjust a patient's prescription at any time by clicking sort of patients and task prescriptions in the menu. So the therapist can monitor how an individual is doing by selecting the patient they want to see via the patient report. And task compliance and time on task are displayed in the top section, And therapists can drill down into specific session data in the session performance detail table. And the assessment task performance graphs help monitor their task performance, see where they're improving, and where they need some guidance. So Peter's going to chat a little bit about a trial that we've run recently at the Prince of Wales Hospital.
Thanks, Jonathan. So what you see there is a table that just outlines some of the studies that we've conducted over the last 10 to 15 years. The original work with the tabletop system started with adults with traumatic brain injury. That work was conducted with the Epworth Hospital in Melbourne. We had a couple of published studies there, a series of case studies, and also a within group study, where I think the thing that stuck out for us at the time was that the effects that we saw were really certainly exceeded our expectations. And it was evident not only in motor skills, but also in adaptive behaviour and functioning in the home, which was really gratifying to see that that the patients were benefiting not just in their skill learning, but also then translating it to real world activities, which was fantastic. There's also work that we conducted with children with cerebral palsy and other forms of hemiplegia. That was a small study that we did in London a few years ago. Also showed some really strong benefits of the training with the kids. And more recently in stroke, in adults with stroke, both a trial for the tabletop system, and that was conducted with the Prince of Wales Hospital in Sydney. Again, showed very strong motor benefits, cognitive benefits, and functional benefits in everyday life, compared with treatment as usual approaches. So that was in a controlled trial. And then the most recent one was the home-based trial of the EDNA 22 system, which came out last year. If we can just go to the next slide. So in this study, we evaluated a course of training over 2 months using the EDNA system compared with a controlled training, which was what's referred to as GRASP, which is essentially a collection of physical activities that encourage upper limb movement as well. So when those two training modes were pitted against each other, what we showed was really quite interesting. If you look at the next slide, you've got a summary there of the treatment effects that we saw. And you can see they're comparing the EDNA, which is in blue, versus the I guess the standard care, the GRASP approach in the pink. And you can look at the effects there. The actual graph, the scaling is a little bit unclear in the sense that if you look at the scale, if you regard anything above 0.5 as a moderate effect, and anything above 0.8 as a really, really strong treatment effect. So what we're seeing there on the tasks that we evaluated the training on, upper limb tasks like the box and blocks test, which might be familiar to some physios and OTs, the 9-hole pegboard test, which is another test of upper limb function. We're getting very strong training benefits for the EDNA, particularly for the more affected hand. And certainly in the case of the box and blocks, it was far superior to the standard care, which was really, really interesting. And we also showed very strong cognitive benefits. So that's the MoCA, which is a pretty well standardized and widely used assessment of cognitive function. Very strong benefits on cognition. The patients also were rating that they improved a great deal, and that's the stroke impact scale, the SIS score there. And finally, the NFI, which is a large questionnaire that evaluates different aspects of functioning, both psychological and physical. We showed very strong training benefits for the EDNA system. So all in all, I think the data, because we like to think that we've developed something that's scientifically validated and it's science-led, which is really important to show that there's benefits. I think the collection of studies that we've conducted so far does that pretty well. So it's been quite, it's been gratifying, and it's been really reassuring that we're onto something. And that's probably enough from me, I think.
Thanks, guys. Got stuck on mute there, but no, very interesting. And I'll just talk quickly to how Enter actually, EDNA integrates with NDIS and how participants actually get that into their plan. So EDNA comes into the assistive technology bracket. In order to get EDNA, what we actually do is one of our specialist trained EDNA physios and OTs will conduct an initial assessment just to make sure that the participant who's been recommended for EDNA meets the criteria required to be able to use the device and get the maximum benefit. So once that's done, we submit an assistive technology report to the NDIS as you would for any other assistive device. Once it's approved, then the device will come out to the participant and the treatment program would be delivered. Treatment is completely remote. So the big benefit that EDNA brings, aside from all the clinical benefits, is the fact that we can provide, market-leading stroke and a neurological rehab to people who otherwise would not have access to those kind of services because of their location, and also intense therapy. So people can train with EDNA at any point of the day that suits them. They can train as many times a day as they like, and within the limits of what the therapist has set their programs to involve. This allows a lot more intense therapy, which is actually a significant cost saving for them when you compare the therapeutic supports that would be provided with someone physically attending the sessions to deliver OT or physiotherapy. So yeah, really great stuff, and thank you guys for the information. I can see again in the chat that a lot of value being delivered, so that's great that everyone's getting some benefit. We'll move on to our next speaker. So yeah, really great to have Rhiannon Martin here. So she's from the Housing Hub, which is a branch of Summer Foundation. Rhiannon is a housing options facilitator at the Housing Hub. So she works with people with disability and their supporters to find out what specialist disability accommodation funding they might be eligible for and how they can explore their housing options. So we'll hear Rhiannon discuss the kind of latest news on SDA eligibility, as well as some tips for evidence gathering for getting SDA into a participant's plan. So welcome to Rhiannon, and I'll hand over to you.
And thanks everyone. You can probably go to the next. About the summer and then have a chat about what the steps to SDA look like, and what some tips are about applying for SDA. So an initiative set up to end the issue of younger people with disability having to live there. So the people with disability to have site housinghub.org it's right for them. Can work together to build a housing market where people and 1,000 properties available on our website across got new options that come for both long-term, short-term, and we also have a role in capturing information about the looking for.
Yeah, and your
with lack of housing.
Your video's cutting off a little bit. It might be good to, if you pause your video, it might just help with the lag. Your connection's not quite stable.
Thank you. I'm just going to move through my house closer to my Wi-Fi route. Helps. I apologize.
The wonders of technology brings us together across the nation, but sometimes doesn't work to our advantage.
Just move. See if that works a little bit. Is that any better?
That sounds like that sounds like we're getting a better connection.
Awesome, Liz. I'll get you to move to the next. So, helping people find the right role about the sorts of housing that people are looking for. There's a problem with a lack of housing. So where people with disability are looking for housing, and the infill demand can be provided to government and SDA developers, which can lead to more accessible housing builds. So part of the way you can help is by just letting people know that we're here to help, provide our contact details, attend our events, etc. I'll get you to go to the next slide, Liz, if that's okay. So if you're thinking about your housing needs and preferences, we've sort of got some questions to get you on your way. And our team's building up a big picture map. We really want to know what the housing needs and preferences are for people with disability. This provides disability in their house. It allows providers, community providers, SDA providers to understand where to do housing. And it's really important that ideals not just look at what's available, as we do want to create a new housing landscape. And we are seeing that there are lots of really exciting new developments in the SDA space, but we also recognise that there's a long way to go and that the accessible market is still thin. So I'll get you to go to the next slide, Liz, thank you. So we've developed a new housing preferences tool to guided questions, able to catch housing area. So essentially what they're going to do is with us the details. They'll be guided through some questions needs and preferences are. They'll be emailed a copy of their answers so they can use that for their housing search. And then we can connect with you with suitability score next to it. So it sort of filters out properties that are going to be suitable for you out of the 1,000 that we have. I'll get you to go to the next slide as well. And to the seeker profile, which is for people with disability. We also have our supporter portal, and this makes everything about your client's housing search easier for a support coordinator. So you can create a seeker profile for you support clients to express what they want in their living through our guided questions, and it will then show you housing options that are a good match for your client's housing seeker profile. What the goal of this is that it streamlines your housing search, which means that you don't have to spend as many support coordination hours looking for housing. It rather look for everything. That makes things a lot easier, but a lot more time for other things to help your clients, such as transition planning, etc. To go to the next slide, Liz, thank you. We also have our upskill program as well if you're looking for paid lots of really great topics such as hospitals, individualized living options, working with people with complex needs through complex systems, and they've also got a fantastic community of practice as well. So definitely recommend having a look at some upskill training if you are looking for some professional development. I'll get you to go to the next slide, thank you. So we've also got our Welcome Home project as well, which is free compliant providers. And while it's been designed for SDA providers, if you're a support coordinator who's a number of people to explore SDA housing options, I'd strongly recommend it's free, and it really does highlight the sort of best practices you should be looking for from an SDA provider, meaning that you can really help the people you support to access housing with providers that are going to do the absolute best by your clients. Next slide, please. So just thought I'd have a little bit of a chat about SDA eligibility. So one funding that the NDIS participant might be able to access in their NDIS plans is called Specialist Disability Accommodation, or SDA. And Specialist Disability Accommodation is housing that's been specifically designed to suit the needs of people who have what the NDIS called an extreme functional impairment or very high support needs. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about what those eligibility criteria are, but it's been estimated that around 6% of NDIS participants, so approximately 30,000 people, will be eligible for SDA funding in their NDIS plans when SDA is fully rolled out. But this is an estimate only and not a cap. And from the most recent quarterly report from the NDIA, it's currently looking at about 16,500 people across Australia have SDA in their plans at the moment. So there's still a considerable amount of people out there who the NDIA do believe would be eligible for SDA. So and whether they would be eligible. So I'm just going to get you to move on to the next slide, please. So when you're approved for SDA funding, the NDIA will consider all of the information on the slides to give you that that price that they give you. So when you're thinking about applying for SDA, you need to consider all of these different things. So the design category, so that's what kind of features do you need in a property, the building type, whether you need an apartment, a townhouse, villa, duplex, a house or a group home, your occupancy, so the number of SDA eligible people who will live in the home. That's something to be really clear. So if you have some, you'd still be wanting to apply for a one resident property, even if that has more bedrooms than one person and more occupants. The number of bedrooms, that pertains particularly to apartments. Location, so the NDIA will provide someone with different SDA funding amounts depending on where you'll be living, and that's sort of based on land costs, etc. So if somebody's, say, looking to live in inner Sydney, then their SDA funding amount might be more than, say, somebody who's wanting to live in Brisbane, for example. The on-site overnight access, that's a room for a support worker to stay in, with or without a breakout room. So that pertains only to for robust homes, and that's using as, say, another room as, say, a sensory room or something like that. So you need to make sure that your evidence addresses all of these. And when somebody you support has been told that they have SDA in their plan, you'll need to know the details around all of this, as it's really difficult to have serious discussions with SDA providers about moving into SDA without this information. So you need to ensure that you get given this information in writing. Next slide. So we're going to just go through all the different steps to apply for SDA, and you should be able to see a pretty handy flow chart coming up here. So we're just going to be focusing on those top 4 points here. So identifying a need for new housing, gathering evidence, being assessed for the NDIA, and searching for new housing. We've sort of told you how to search for new housing first by creating a profile in the Housing Hub. So I'll get you to go to the next slide, please. So the first thing somebody needs if they're going to be exploring their housing options is making sure that they have a housing goal on their NDIS plan. So they can do that. So an NDIS participant can do this even if they don't want to move straight away. But the NDIS cannot think about what kind of funding you need if it doesn't know that you're going to make a big change. So a person needs a goal about housing on their NDIS plan. And a housing goal just means saying what you want to happen with your housing. So you need to think about the right words for the NDIS. So thinking about things like wanting to live independently, wanting to move out to be safe, etc. And some things, we've just put some things on the slides for things you can think about, where you want to live, how many people you want to live with, and the way you want to be supported. You can't put on an NDIS goal, obviously, I want to live in a specialist disability accommodation property, or I want to live in SIL, but you can put that I want to live independently in a home that meets my needs. I'll get you to go to the next slide, please. So when we're thinking about SDA evidence gathering, you have to demonstrate SDA eligibility, which is having an extreme functional impairment or very high support needs. So having an extreme functional impairment means that even if your home's been set up to suit you, you still need people to support you with your daily activities. So that might be things like getting in and out of bed, getting dressed, moving around, getting meals ready, or going out into the community. So if you think about a practical example, you might have a hoist to help you transfer into your wheelchair, but you might need a person or even 2 people to help you with that. Next slide, please. And having very high support needs means that you need many hours of support every day. So it might mean that your parents provide you with a lot of your support, but maybe they're getting older, or you may have spent a long time living in a group home or a nursing home. It may also mean that sometimes you act in a way that might not be safe for you or the people around you. So when we say many hours, we ask, do you need someone to assist you with your day-to-day tasks for more than 5 hours a day? We also ask, do you need someone nearby when you are alone in case you need support? So we know some people need someone in the same room as them or in another room nearby a lot of the time, but we also know that many people are still getting a lot of help from their informal supports, or they're making do with fewer hours of support than they need. So when you're sort of thinking about whether somebody might be eligible through this very high support needs pathway, it's very important to count the hours of support that you need to live well and not just make do. So consider things like putting together a 24-hour snapshot, or a week-long snapshot that really highlights the support that that person needs. When applying for SDA, you only need to demonstrate either how somebody has an extreme functional impairment or very high support needs. It's or, not and. Next slide, please. So when putting together your application for SDA, it can include things like a participant housing statement from you about what home you need, a functional capacity report from an allied health professional, and any other evidence that you might need, and the home and living supports form. Next slide, please. And a critical part of the evidence and application process for SDA is justifying to the NDIA why an SDA response is the best course of action for a person's housing. And this is why the search for mainstream housing or other options is required. So that might just be having a look at what's available at the moment. But the application really does need to state why mainstream housing is not appropriate and that SDA is great for all these reasons. And the person writing the application needs to provide evidence that suggests that SDA housing will meet the person's needs more than mainstream housing and not equal to it. So we've adapted the question on these slides from the legislation, the SDA rules, and housing reports and plans do require comment on each of them to evidence a person's need for SDA. So how will for example, how will SDA support someone to reach their goals? Jack, I'm going to assume that I can share these slides. If you can share these slides out afterwards, so you can refer to them. But you're also welcome to come and reach out to us at any point in time if you have questions. Next slide, please. So a participant housing statement is a really important part of any SDA application because it's an opportunity for the participant to describe their preferred SDA building type, occupancy and support model in their own words. And it's really important that the participant describes how their preferred housing and support arrangements will support them to achieve their NDIS goals. Not everyone can write their own participant statement, and their family is able to do this on their behalf, but it should reflect what the participant's wishes are and what their goals are. And some people have made things like videos instead of a written statement, as that's how they prefer to communicate. So if you're a support coordinator, you can work with the participant and their family to put together a housing statement that really does reflect them and what they want. Next slide, please. So for a functional capacity report for SDA, you are really looking for quite a special report that does go beyond a standard functional capacity assessment. So while the report will detail how that person's disability affects their activity to daily life, we'd also, for an SDA report, we'd also want to see recommendations for, one, how that person meets the SDA eligibility, so having very high support needs or an extreme functional impairment, the SDA design category, the SDA dwelling type, where they want to be living and what kind of support model they want to be supported in. And again, we'll share that. I'll let Jack share these slides if you want. I'll get you to go to the next slide, please. And then you can also consider any additional evidence that needs to be provided. So that might be things like a positive behaviour support plan, incident reports, say things like pictures of property damage, rental inspection documentation, but all evidence that you put together really needs to be consistent and accurately reflect what the participant's support needs and wishes are. Next slide, please. So finally, it just has to be submitted with the home and living supports form on the website. So you can use this form to ask for SDA funding in both home and living supports. We think it's really important to think about your eligibility in the reports that you have before you send this form to the NDIS. And if you're not familiar with this form, it is just sort of like a drop-down box generally, but then just make sure on any boxes that have got text boxes that you really are clear what you're asking for. So next slide, please. So just to be really clear, the Home and Living Supports panel looks at your SDA application and not the local office. So when you're putting together your SDA application, you send that through to inquiries@ndis.gov.au, and you'll need to follow up with inquiries at ndis.gov.au as well.
Hey Matthew, this is Sam again, just from rehab. I just wanted to introduce myself, taking over your file from Sarah. I just wanted to take the time to just...
Sammy, you're, if you could just mute, thank you.
So, sorry, I am wrapping this up now. I'll just get you to go to the next slide, Liz, really quickly. Thank you. So just refreshing back to the slide. When you're approved for SDA funding, the NDIS will consider all of this information on the slides to make their decision about your funding type. So you need to make sure that your evidence addresses all of this. So when you've told you got given SDA funding in your plan, you will need to know the details about this. And when you're working with somebody to apply for SDA, you need to make sure that all of the evidence addresses this and that you've worked with somebody to kind of understand not only what SDA is, but also what the different design categories and the features that go with that are, what kind of building type would they be moving into, and what kind of support model and who they want to live with is. It's critical. Next slide, please. So I'll just leave you with kind of 4 really good tips and tricks, but the 4 best things we sort of can see for somebody applying for SDA is 1, having a good team. So a team that's experienced and supportive. You know, ideally, if somebody moving into SDA requires a high level of interaction between the NDIS participant, their family and friends, the SDA provider, a support provider, their support coordinator, and allied health. So you really do want a good team that's well coordinated. 2, making sure that all of that person's needs and preferences are the same in all reports. One of my colleagues, Ryan, he does not have a speech impediment, but when he was looking through a report of one of his, he noticed that somebody had put down that he had a speech impediment, so he had to go back and get that changed. It was a mistake, but it's just been really just making sure that everything is written. I'm just making sure that there's nothing that stands out that the home and living panel might raise a question about. Also 3, what support do you need to feel safe, to stay safe? It feels really yucky in a system that's about helping people be more independent, but something somebody could do is think about what their worst day is or a worst case scenario in their home, and or think about a list of what ifs, and then you can think about all of the things that they need to keep them safe. The other thing to do is obviously always applying reasonable and necessary. So look at the design features that you need and show how these will provide support or a difference that you cannot get with just support workers, therapists, and assistive technology. So thank you. So my last slide is please connect with us if you've got any questions. So you can call our SDA advice line on 1300 616463. You can shoot us an email. You can connect with us on social media. We run a range of free events regularly. We're running one on Robust SDA tomorrow, for example. But we're here to help, and we absolutely love helping. So thank you. And sorry about my internet connection problems. Cheers.
Thank you, Rhiannon. No, that was super detailed, and I know from looking in the questions that people got some value there. Some great resources. We know obviously support coordination doesn't necessarily always get all the hours that you need. An SDA is a complex process, so the resources that you've linked there, massive time saving and really help with the process. So yeah, just in reference to maybe it cleaned up your audio, but at the beginning was a little bit jumpy. So we'll send out some links and some of the useful resources from the slides if you're happy, Rhiannon, just to fill in any gaps. So to round up, we'll just jump into a couple of the questions that were in the chat. So if we go in reverse, actually, we had an SDA question from Julie. So if someone has a desire to move into a rental SDA property whilst waiting for a purpose-built home, will the SDA funding move across both properties, or is this not allowed? If Rhiannon, if I leave that with you.
Yeah, Julie, that's a great question. So once you're approved for SDA funding, that sits in a participant's plan. They can't have it across 2 properties at once, only the property that they're living in at the moment. But if you're living in an SDA property and you want to move, that funding will follow you to the next property and will just kick in the next property when you move. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhiannon. So yeah, what we'll do is we'll actually do a little summary email to everyone that's attended today, just to run through, the points with Jam, Emma, and EDNA, as well as with Summer Foundation. Any other questions, you can shoot me an email and we can get information out to you. So finally, what we'll do is we will announce our winners for Dylan Olcott's book. So I have the lucky list here. So April Hobbs, Athlia M, Evan Salt, Trinkle Thomas, and Susan Burns. So we'll put those, we'll collect your email information and copies will be out to you. So congratulations. Thank you for everyone, firstly, for attending in your lunch breaks. It's much appreciated. Thank you so much to our speakers, and equally, for everyone tuning in, and some good questions in there as well. Also, a big shout out to Liz in our marketing team, working behind the scenes to get this event ready. So a big thank you to Liz as well. So as I said, any further questions for ourselves at Ability Partners, any of our speakers, you can email myself at jack@abilitypartners.com. And if there's something you're still unsure of, by all means, give me a call. We also invite you to follow Ability Partners on LinkedIn just to see our latest updates, blogs and articles, and obviously sharing any news from speakers that you've heard from today. So thank you again, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thanks,
guys.
Jack.
Thank you.